Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. On behalf of Santa Clara University President, Father Michael Ang, I welcome all of you to this opening session of the conference called Our Future on a Shared Planet, Silicon Valley in Conversation with the Environmental Teachings of Pope Francis. We extend a warm welcome to all who are visiting our campus, and we, of course, warmly welcome all Santa Clara students, staff, and faculty, and all who are part of our community as alums and affiliates. Pope Francis specifically addressed his groundbreaking encyclical, Laudato Si, not only to Catholics, but to all people of goodwill. Of course, that encyclical, which was issued in June, is the occasion for this conference and for this gathering of all of us, people of goodwill, to think through together how to respond to the great challenge of climate change and how to fulfill our great obligation to care for our common home, the earth. I'm David DeCoste, Director of Campus Ethics Programs at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics here at Santa Clara, a Catholic theologian on the Religious Studies faculty, and the chair of the faculty, staff, and student organizing committee that pulled together this conference. We invite all of you to join us tomorrow for the second day of the conference, which will include talks by UC San Diego climatologist Virabhadran Ramanathan, San Jose Mayor Sam Liccardo, Stanford ecologist Gretchen Daly, and former Kleiner Perkins venture capitalist John Deniston. The conference begins tomorrow at 9 a.m. in the Locatelli Center on campus. More information is available at www.scu.com/Pope Francis. That's one word. Today we will hear a keynote address by Cardinal Peter Turkson, the President of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. Our President, Father Michael Ang, will introduce Cardinal Turkson in a moment. I wish only to say now to the Cardinal that we are so deeply grateful to him for his generosity in making the long journey from Rome to be with us. Please. It is my great pleasure now to introduce Father Michael Ang, the 28th President of Santa Clara University. Father Ang has made environmental justice and sustainability a central focus of his presidency and of the strategic mission of Santa Clara. Indeed, the idea for this conference came from him. Father Ang.
Thank you, David, for the introduction, and thank you and all the members of the Planning Committee. We would not be here if you hadn't stepped forward and given your time over the course of the summer to have many meetings to plan this conference. So I'm very grateful to you and all the members of the faculty, staff, and student organizing committee. I want to say a special welcome to all of you who have made the journey here to be with us as part of this conference, and it's a great pleasure for us to be hearing one of the most influential voices in the church today on issues of the environment. I'm going to begin with a brief summary of his many accomplishments. Cardinal Peter Turkson of Ghana was ordained a priest in 1975 for the Archdiocese of Cape Coast, Ghana, and was ordained an archbishop in 1993. He's earned degrees in theology and advanced degree in scripture from St. Anthony on Hudson in upstate New York and the Pontifical Biblical Institute in Rome. And then later in the world of higher education, he's held positions at the University of Cape Coast, the Catholic Major Seminary, and the Catholic University College of Ghana. If this wasn't enough, Cardinal Turkson has served in many capacities, including the General Relator of the Second Special Assembly for Africa for the Synod of Bishops. He was president of the Ghana Catholic Bishops' Conference and president of the Regional Episcopal Conference of West Africa. He currently holds positions in the Vatican that include the Congregation for the Doctrine of Faith, the Congregation for Catholic Education, the Pontifical Council for Promoting Christian Unity, the Ordinary Council of the Secretariat General of the Synod of Bishops, and the Special Council for Africa for the General Secretariat of the Synod of Bishops. That's a mouthful. He also serves as president of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace. And earlier, he worked for Justice and Peace as chair of the Ghana chapter of the Conference of Religious for Peace and the Ghana National Peace Council. So this afternoon, I not only have the honor of introducing Cardinal Turkson, but also then the pleasure of bestowing on him the university's highest honor, which is the St. Clara Award. We rarely give this award. Previous recipients include Mother Teresa of Calcutta and the theologian John Sobrino of the University of Central America in El Salvador. So Cardinal Turkson, it's with your prophetic voice that you have helped the world community understand that care of the earth is a matter of justice. You note that behaviors and lifestyles that negatively impact the earth also diminish the lives of our neighbors, particularly the poor. Since Laudato Si, you have urged religious leaders, business people, politicians, local communities to take up the Pope's call for action. So with great intellect and pastoral care, you have articulated a hopeful global vision of what peace can look like. You've reiterated the Pope's propositions that real change only comes through dialogue and mobilization from below, essential for the effecting change. And so here at Santa Clara University, we are taking up your plea to effect change in matters of environmental justice. Our conference is an academic and grassroots outreach to talk about how we understand the challenge and how we might foster change in the Silicon Valley to better serve the common good. And so, Your Eminence, Cardinal Turkson, for your tireless work and for the environment and for your joy-filled way of proceeding and for giving voice to the poor who suffer most from environmental degradation, on behalf of Santa Clara University, I present you the St. Clair Award. So.
So, my Lord Bishops, Father Eng, President of this university, dear professors, lecturers, friends, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to thank you sincerely, personally, for this honor done me, and it is an honor done to our whole council, the Pontifical Council of Justice and Peace. We do have a small place in our office where we display stuff like that, so that's going to be But on behalf of the Pontifical Council for Justice and Peace, I wish to thank you very warmly for your great hospitality and for the invitation to be part of this celebration, two-day celebration. Santa Clara University has set itself the task of exploring the implications of Pope Francis's encyclical on integral ecology. It seems especially fitting to talk about the encyclical of the first Jesuit Pope at a leading Jesuit university. And that's why we're glad, despite all the obstacles and difficulties, to respond to the invitation to be here. We couldn't have honored Pope Francis in any better way. I will begin with a reflection on the common home. Next, I will set the views of Pope Francis on climate change and the environment within our Catholic tradition, and explore how the encyclical is being received and how it can make a difference in the current environmental discussions. I shall then commend 6 key realizations and commitments for you to consider. Then I'll turn to practical action by Catholics and their institutions around the world, including this country. Then, simply put, how can America, your university over here, and Silicon Valley respond to the Pope's call to action? How can Laudato Si guide and even influence the road to the important 2015 climate summit in Paris, codenamed COP21? So let's begin with our considerations on the Pope's use and reference to our common home. Our common home globally and in the Silicon Valley, you're probably aware of the broad vision of Laudato Si. Here are some of the main points that the Holy Father develops. He says humanity is not separate from the environment in which it lives. Rather, humanity and the natural environment are one. Then he goes on to say that the accelerating change in climate is undeniable, catastrophic, and worsened by human activities, but it is also amenable to human intervention. And this he will develop as the hopeful note of his encyclical. He goes on then to say the grave errors that underlie our disastrous indifference to the environment include a throwaway culture of consumerism and the marginalization and indeed trivialization of ethics. The twofold crisis can be overcome, not by more of the same, but through change arising from generous dialogue and fundamental ethical and indeed spiritual decision-making at every level. Even this brief summary makes clear that Laudato Si is not a green, ecological, or climate change document, but a full social encyclical in the tradition of the Church's social teaching, going way back to Pope Leo XIII in 1882 in his encyclical Rerum Novarum. Social encyclicals apply the basic principles of the Church's social teaching to the changing challenges facing humanity. Laudato Si is therefore solidly based and rooted within this tradition, and its subtitle, On Care for Our Common Home, conveys an important conviction. Homes are not isolated, each on its own planet. They are located in neighborhoods and communities, and finally in a single home that we call our earth. The encyclical then is about implications of living together in a common home. The word common brings to mind the so-called tragedy of the commons. This expression can apply to all situations where the self-interested actions of one or more agents deplete a common resource. And so, for example, in Laudato Si, the Pope declares that climate and the atmosphere are common goods, belonging to all and meant for all. The oceans and other natural resources should likewise be considered as a global commons and protected by an appropriate system of governance. The principle of the universal destination of the goods of creation is also applied to the global carbon sinks of the atmosphere, of the oceans, and of the forests. And so, in order to protect the poorest and to avoid dangerous climate change, these sinks must be prevented from overuse. And so, who is going then to decide fairly and squarely about preserving our common home? And are the decisions really going to be carried out? Among its main points, Laudato Si critiques a naive confidence that technological advances alone and undirected commercial market will inevitably and automatically solve our environmental problems. Let me then pause here to dwell on technological advances. There are a few here: Santa Clara, Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley is the center of the major technological revolution of our times. The revolution that has taken the world beyond the industrial age into the new digital age. So the digital revolution has also brought environmental and social challenges. For example, local communities have come into intense conflict with mining companies that are exploiting resources to make computer and mobile devices. And the overconsumption of electronic devices is also causing widespread environmental and public health concern. We need to go and look for cobalt. We need to go and look for different minerals to be able to construct and to maintain some of these gadgets. And so Pope Francis is deeply concerned with technology in Laudato Si, not because he doesn't want technological advancement, but he just wishes that technological advancement would be guided by ethical considerations. And so, in his nuanced treatment, the Holy Father takes two complementary approaches. The first, the long paragraph 47 in his Encyclical, examines the impact on persons and personal relationships. Undoubtedly, we benefit from increased capacity to communicate. And who better to witness to that than me from Africa? There's no way anybody could have thought about communication becoming possible in the Congo forest if it wasn't for mobile telephony. And so it is that mobile telephony, for example, has revolutionized communication patterns in several places in Africa and still in a lot of the developing countries. However, the more that people live together their digital tools, the less they may learn how to live wisely, to think deeply, and to love generously. How can new media bring attention to what is worthwhile rather than obscure it? Can it engender true wisdom as the fruit of self-examination, dialogue, generous encounters between persons? We must be wary of the mere accumulation of data and contrived emotion that can shield us from direct contact with the pain, the fears, and the joys of others, and the complexity of their personal experiences. Second consideration of Pope Francis is that he devotes 4 paragraphs, paragraphs 102 to 105, to the promise and the dangers of technological progress in all areas, not just personal computing and communications. He begins with homage to 2 centuries of enormous waves of change that have benefited humanity, from steam engines to robotics, biotechnologies, and nanotechnologies. Technology indeed has remedied countless evils which used to harm and to limit human beings. And so, properly directed, technoscience can produce important means of improving the quality of human life in all practical areas and also in our aesthetic dimensions. But what about the wise use of technologies? What about the tremendous power they provide to those with the knowledge and especially the economic recurrence to use them? Thinking of constantly improved technologies to torture and kill on a massive scale, the Pope asks, in whose hands does all the power lie? Or will it eventually end up? It is extremely risky for a small part of humanity to have such great power. He could also ask about drones, which are proliferating. Who considers the grave moral questions about techno-warfare, human rights, and international humanitarian laws? And so the underlying error is the naive confidence that goodness and truth automatically flow from technological and economic powers as such. We lag in development in human responsibility, values, and conscience. And so we advance in technological power, sometimes without understanding its consequences and limitations. And so ultimately, this diminishes human autonomy. Our freedom fades when it is handed over to blind forces of the unconscious, of immediate needs, of self-interest, and even of violence. In the succinct words of the Honduran Archbishop, Cardinal Archbishop Oscar Rodrigo Maradiaga, man finds himself to be a technical giant and an ethical child. We have succumbed to the technological paradigm, an attitude of efficiency devoid of morality, with profit as the unquestioned goal, and with uncritical use sometimes of power. And so, as the Holy Father pointed out, the technological paradigm has become so dominant that it will be difficult to do without its resources, and even more difficult to utilize them without being dominated by their internal logic. And so, in fact, it has become countercultural to choose a lifestyle whose goals are even partly independent of technology, of its cost, of its power to globalize and to make us all the same. In Laudato Si, then, Pope Francis deplores the technological trends to absorb everything into ironclad logic, so our capacity to make decisions, a more genuine freedom, and a space for each one's alternative creativity to be diminished. Accordingly, Francis adopts an approach which is a balanced one. He does not call for a nostalgic reversal of history. He does not bemoan technological advance in itself. He does decry, however, the enormous but largely hidden power which technology bestows on those who control it, along with the economy and the finance. And so, we come to where we are now. Here in Silicon Valley, more specifically, I think he might say that in the midst of so much creative technological thinking, there is far too little critical thinking about technology. So there is a lot of technological thinking, but what about the thinking about technology itself? So your challenge is to think in this thoroughly balanced way. The world is expecting you in this unique place of the planet, here in Santa Clara, to ask bold and avant-garde questions about the future. How will digital ecology keep the web open in order to democratize knowledge for everyone? How will the digital divide and the data gap be closed to give all people access to information for a better quality of life? How will the internet get beyond rampant consumerism and become a space of discussion, of production, and indeed of solidarity? As you may know, it was the economist Amartya Sen of Harvard who said that development may not be conceived and poverty may not be thought of in terms of how many dollars per day people have to live on, but in terms of access to information, access to knowledge, access to health care. And if access to information and knowledge is a key to solving poverty, then Silicon Valley and here in Santa Clara, there's a clear cut-out space for you. In sum, to Santa Clara University, may I then suggest to help the Silicon Valley community to focus the critical and the prophetic light of Laudato Si on all new microtechnology as it is created and as it is applied. With this, then, let us turn our gaze to how Pope Francis's Encyclical would influence or may influence our movement towards Paris. The Christian commitment to care for our common home goes back in Genesis itself. There we learn that all creation is good. Moreover, we're told that humanity is formed out of the dust of the earth and mandated by the loving Creator to till and to keep the earth, the garden given as a gift to the human family. And so Catholic social teaching since the Second Vatican Council has increasingly recognized that the care of creation is intimately connected to other Christian commitments. In particular, environmental harm compromises the commitment to promote the common good and to protect human life itself and the dignity of individuals. Human-forced climate change is unequivocally a moral issue. Therefore, the Church has called for public policies to mitigate the greenhouse gas emissions and assist those most affected by the adverse effects of climate change. It was Blessed Paul VI who first articulated such teaching in 1971. St. John Paul II elaborated it further, and in 1990, he went on to define what he meant by human ecology and the need for ecological conversion. Pope Benedict XVI took it further, identifying two new forms of ecologies: social ecology and the ecology of peace. Throughout these years, individual bishops and episcopal conferences, including the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops, have spoken out powerfully on the issue. Internationally, bishops and Catholic development organizations continue to press nations for a just, science-based international climate agreement in Paris. And so just over a week ago, indeed on the 28th of October, 90 leaders of churches of regional episcopal conferences, including the president of the U.S. Bishops' Conference, Bishop Joseph Kurtz of Louisville, signed an appeal to COP21 negotiating parties, calling on everyone at COP21 to heed the call of Laudato Si, not to come and to resort to rhetorics again, but to come out of the meeting with concrete actions, concrete decisions about concrete actions and things to undertake. The declaration makes 10 specific points. For example, it asserts that climate and atmosphere are global common goods that are belonging to all and meant for all, and then calls for a fair, transformational, and legally binding global agreement based on our vision of the world that recognizes the need to live in harmony with nature and to guarantee the fulfillment of human rights for all, including those of indigenous peoples, women, youth, and workers. And so I'm happy to note that these perspectives are shared more widely in Christianity and by other faiths. For example, here in the United States, on the 20th of October, the National Association of Evangelicals called for action on the care of creation. Muslims and Buddhists have issued climate statements in recent months, which we just heard about this afternoon. On the multi-faith front, the Religions for Peace organization has mounted a campaign called Faith for the Earth. What has Pope Francis contributed to all of this? Beginning with his choice of a name, he has made concern for the poor and the planet a signature of his papacy. Nature and the human family are both works of God, and they are, both of them, very fragile. Moreover, Pope Francis has deliberately inserted his teaching and indeed leadership into the international political process that is trying to respond to climate change. And so, what concretely are his contributions? Parts of Laudato Si reiterate information and positions that are already widely known. But overall, the Encyclical provides a unique blend of perspectives. And we just want to briefly present 6 such simple perspectives. First, it affects everyone. Climate pollution and weather events do not respect borders. Now, wealth and privilege, neither wealth nor privilege. No walls, no gated community can keep the environment at bay. Some are more affected than others because of geographical location or the lack of power to protect themselves or to escape the spiral of self-destruction which eventually engulfs them. And so bishops from the Pacific Islands will call at our office and say, where they used to grow crops on their island is now on the seawater. And that the highest point of their island is only 4.5 meters. And so it is that some feel the impact of climate change more than others. So, what is at stake then is justice between people and generations. The dignity of those who inhabit the planet now and those who will inhabit the planet in the future. And at stake is the very possibility of human life on earth itself. The world's poor, the world's poor play hardly any role. And they are especially affected by climate change, even though their contribution may be very minimal. The bottom 3 billion account for a mere 6% of cumulative carbon emissions. So while environmental deterioration affects everyone, the obligation of justice is weighted towards helping the poor to develop and to avoid the fallout from climate change. Second consideration, everyone must act. We think automatically about the rulers, and several times the Encyclical addresses those who have the power to decide, urging them to take responsibility for the common good, even if they have to go against the mindset of short-term gain which dominates present-day economics and politics. But Pope Francis makes it evident that this is not a topic for experts, for technicians. This is something that affects all of us. Everyone must act, even the child who turns off lights so as to reduce electricity consumption. And more broadly, there needs to be a popular movement of citizens to act communally and to demand courageous action by leaders and negotiations in favor of the poor and of the planet. On the 29th of November, this is what hundreds of thousands of men, women, and children will do in the global climate and in their march in the streets of Paris and some 3,000 other cities around the world. The third consideration is that we need to be truthful in how we go about solving this problem. We must have the courage to identify the problems. There are so very many who still deny the evident facts of what we are doing to our planet and to each other, masking the problems of concealing their symptoms. We gain nothing when we deny the impact of fossil fuels, both for good and for evil. Indeed, they power the technology of the Industrial Revolution, which paved the way for unprecedented living standards. But time marches on, and now they threaten to undermine all we have achieved. Further, we must stop pretending that infinite or unlimited growth is possible, as if there is an infinite supply of the earth's resources. Fourth consideration for us this afternoon, it is that we should embrace integral ecology as a way of thinking about our lives on the planet. The expression integral ecology recalls ancient awareness that all living beings, human groups and systems, as well as non-human ones, that is, all of creation, are fundamentally interconnected and interrelated. Only with attentive care for these complex problems of today's world, particularly those regarding the environment and the poor, can these problems which we encounter be dealt with. So reversing the degradation of both the natural planet and the human world requires the combined contribution of us all. No branch of science, no form of wisdom, including culture, religion, spirituality, should be neglected. Fifth consideration for us is that we should practice and take seriously the path of dialogue suggested by Pope Francis. Pope Francis insists on dialogue as the only way to confront the problems of our world and to seek solutions that are truly effective. Authentic dialogue is honest and transparent. It insists on open negotiations based on the principles which the social teachings of the Church vigorously promote, namely solidarity, subsidiarity, working for the common good, universal destinations of the goods of the earth, and preferential option for the poor. Real dialogue would not allow particular interests of individual countries or specific groups to hijack the negotiations. And so, the sixth point of Pope Francis is that we should pray. We should pray about the COP21 meeting, and we should pray about and for decisions that will be taken. Prayer is not the general fashion today. It takes humility and daring. Because it challenges the hubris of our supposedly advanced, highly secular civilization. Pray for the earth. Pray for humanity. Pray for bold decisions now for the sake of the future of humanity itself, and pray about the planet's future. And gladly, as you know, last 1st of September, Pope Francis directed the Catholic Church to join the Orthodox Church in dedicating the 1st of September to prayer for the care of creation. So, by way of concluding, I wish to briefly look at what Laudato Si can be saying to USA, to Americans, and its path towards Paris. Consistent with the public nature of faith and the responsibility for Catholics to exercise what the U.S. bishops call faithful citizenship, Pope Francis has sought, through Laudato Si, to shape the discourse and negotiations of COP21. The Holy Father timed the release of the Encyclical so as to contribute to the Paris Summit, and throughout the Encyclical, he emphasizes the need for an international climate change agreement. And so, addressing the U.S. Congress last September, the Pope called for a courageous and responsible effort to redirect our steps and to avert the most serious effects of environmental deterioration caused by human activity. And so, just how urgent is the situation? The global atmospheric concentration of carbon dioxide today is nearly 50% per million higher, roughly 50% higher than what it was in the days of St. Paul II. At over 400 parts per million, they are at the highest level in 3 million years. And while some nations, communities, and individuals are already committed to reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, we can draw attention to the resolution of China and France committing themselves to reduce this at this summit that is coming up. We wish to encourage the very many other people to embrace this challenge. So at COP21, nations would hopefully agree on binding enforceable plan to keep the global temperature from rising more than 1.5 or 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. And even then, the South Pacific islands of Tuvalu might still disappear, because no point of that island, as I observed, is above 4 meters. And so what about the role of the United States? Pope Francis encouraged the American leadership on the issue at the political level in terms of supporting an agreement to stop climate change, and at a personal level to develop those deep-rooted ecological virtues necessary for healing, protecting, and preserving our planet. In encouraging this ecological conversion, the Pope is calling on America to honor its tradition and founding principles. There is a great stream of environmental reverence in American sensibility and thought, going all the way back to the writings of Emerson, Thoreau, and Whitman. In the early 20th century, President Theodore Roosevelt championed the idea of conservation. The U.S. is also founded on a strong tradition of natural rights, emphasizing the dignity of every human being. And so, deeply respectful of religious liberty, it does not seek to banish religion from the public square. Many of the great social justice movements in this country have had religious roots. And so, The abolition, for example, of slavery, Martin Luther King's campaign against institutional racism, Dorothy Day's passion for justice and for the cause of the oppressed, and how Monsignor John A. Ryan used Cali social teaching to influence President Roosevelt's New Deal. Today, American support for the United Nations and American international leadership are more needed than ever, specifically to help solve the crisis of climate change. This may well be the most important challenge of the 21st century, and it calls for global dialogue and leadership. It is a moral issue of the highest order. No country can tackle this alone, nor can the poorer ones without much help. The threat to our common home requires common solutions. It requires international agreement to phase out harmful carbon emissions and move instead towards renewable sources of energy. This is a central message of Laudato Si. Finally, to the core question, what kind of world do we want to leave to those who come after us, to children who are now growing up? This is a matter of both intergenerational and intergovernmental solidarity. I am confident then that America can tap into the very best of its moral foundations and traditions and play a strong leadership role in overcoming this crisis. I know there is a lot of good work going on already. The Environmental Protection Agency of this country has announced their Clean Power Plan that will reduce carbon pollution from existing power plants. And Pope Francis explicitly praised President Obama for his efforts to reduce air pollution. Additionally, the U.S. has pledged $3 billion to the International Green Climate Fund that will enable lesser developed nations to mitigate and to adapt to climate change. So here in California, the American pioneer of innovative climate solutions, leaders are trying to mitigate the drought, reduce carbon emissions, and build a more sustainable future. The U.S. Conference of Bishops advocates for a national carbon pollution standard, and in international appeal, called on the world community to strongly limit a global temperature increase and to set a goal for complete decarbonization by middle of the century. And so ultimately, I believe that America can marshal its best resources to solve the climate challenge and protect our common home. And it has the resourcefulness of a place like the Silicon Valley to do this. But also its core value like compassion, human rights, sense of solidarity, and commitment to the global common good come handy, and America has risen to such occasions before, and we believe it can do it again. So your Excellencies, my brothers and my sisters, Laudato Si calls for action at every level. Remembering that realities are more important than ideas, may all at COP21 in Paris be inspired to commit not just to words of agreement, but also to concrete measures and action. For your part, I've suggested 6 perspectives from Laudato Si for addressing the environmental crisis in your research, teaching, and outreach. It affects everyone. Everyone must act. We need to be truthful about what is happening, and we must embrace integral ecology and embrace the path of dialogue, and finally pray for concrete solutions. From Silicon Valley and from Santa Clara, through the US and around the world, let us learn to exercise global ecological citizenship, having received nature from God, the Creator, as a gift and as a garden. Let us bequeath it to those who come after us, not as a wilderness, but as a garden. So let us sustain humanity and the care for our common home, the beautiful planet, the garden that the Lord entrusted into our hands. And I wish to thank you for your kind attention and for listening. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cardinal Turkson. Our respondent today to Cardinal Turkson is John Kohler, the Executive Fellow and Director of Impact Capital at the Miller Center for Social Entrepreneurship at Santa Clara University. Mr. Kohler has served for years in executive positions in major Silicon Valley companies. After his response, we will have time for questions and discussion. Mr. Kohler.
Such courage. We pray for you and Pope Francis as well. So it's with some poetic justice that I stand before you today. I met Cardinal Turkson last year at a wonderful conclave that he hosted in Investing for the Poor. It was to look at impact investing, which we're all involved with here, and see the Church's role, determine the Church's role in impact investing. And so when I heard that he was coming out, I pounded on the table and loudly proclaimed to anyone who would listen that the university has such a wonderful response to this, to Laudato Si, and that we had a wonderful response perhaps to some of the actions that the Pope might see as exemplary. So here I sit. And I would say to all you students, be careful what you agitate for. So thank you, Cardinal Turkson, for your comments, and thank you on behalf of all of Santa Clara University. It is true that as a Jesuit university at the heart of Silicon Valley, we have a unique position. We have a unique place in the heart of entrepreneurial and innovation in the ecosystem that exists here. Today we consider how to connect, what to do about the call of Pope Francis and your words today. Your 5 points, plus our prayer, and the call to action that I think we all face in these challenges. The New York Times published a few weeks ago that 2015 would be the warmest year on record. Climate change is occurring. Laudato Si, Pope Francis says the most global warming is due to the great concentration of greenhouse gases released mainly as a result of human activity. The UN Conference on Climate Change, crafting a difficult international agreement to reach global net zero greenhouse gas emissions by mid-century, and then work to sequester the carbon. It's urgent. If we exceed the 2% budget that for the rise in Earth's surface temperature, if we exceed that, then we will see increasing climatic events. We already are, as you just explained to us, are seeing these. And massive storms, floods, raging wildfires, drought, as we're very familiar with here in California, new tropical diseases because of expansion of tropical zones will be the result. In Laudato Si, it cites the tragic rise in the number of migrants seeking to flee from the growing poverty caused by environmental degradation and their inability to earn a living. One of our Silicon Valley leaders, Elon Musk, a few weeks ago at an address in Berlin, talked about that the millions of climate refugees that exist today will be dwarfed by the hundreds of millions of climate refugees if we don't address this climate and global warming issue. So already in Laudato Si, it cites affecting the ability of the essential resources like drinking water, energy, and agricultural production. Ocean acidification through CO2 absorption affects fisheries. Deforestation reduces food sources and traditional medicines, access to the very things that the people nearby need so critically. Water for agriculture is becoming scarce. What we recognize at Santa Clara University is that climate change impacts the poor the most. We are dependent, or they are dependent on the ecosystems such as forests and fisheries and agriculture, as I just mentioned. But these communities are often located in the marginal zones, saline agricultural zones, arid zones near desertification, tropical zones that are expanding. These are the zones that are most vulnerable, and these are the homes of the poor. Of the poor, women are most effective. They are active with food, fuel, and water. We must address these root causes and create communities that can, in fact, have some climate resilience. Climate resilience is the capacity of poor communities to absorb stresses of adverse climate effects, maintain function, and adapt to sustainable systems that prepare them for future climatic change impacts. Pope Francis's call to action is to all people of goodwill. We hope to count ourselves in that number. Care for our common home, and he notes that climate is a common good. It is also now a common challenge. A core message, integral ecology, is that everything is connected. Human well-being and environmental well-being are all connected. There are responsibilities. The global north has an ecological debt. We emitted most of the greenhouse gases. Our actions today and tomorrow should repay this ecological debt to the global south. Climate change is at the front and center of the conversation globally, which is great. I remember growing up and the birth of Earth Day, and I had bell bottoms. The conversation, I think, was pretty light. It was a very kind of, wouldn't it be nice if? I think the conversation today is much more urgent and much more serious, which we welcome. There is a remarkable convergence, too, in this conversation. The UN Sustainable Development Goals, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, all agree. A shift from fossil fuels to renewable energy and technology must happen. Technology, which we are so blessed with in this area, is necessary but not sufficient. Laudato Si points out worldwide there is still minimal access to clean and renewable energy. There still is a need to develop adequate storage technologies. Now, the company here, Elon Musk company Tesla, has a gigafactory, and that's an example both of the advance of storage technologies and of getting it to scale. Silicon Valley is great, not because of inventions alone, but because of inventions that reach scale. Our answer to the call for action is the international development of appropriate technologies in parallel with mechanisms to scale access to these technologies. Cardinal Turkson, you speak of a lens in your comments. And I think when we look to our response as a university, we apply that same lens to our body of work so far and the body of work that we intend. Santa Clara University is uniquely positioned in Silicon Valley to partner and answer these calls. We link innovation and entrepreneurship with Jesuit tradition of serving the poor and protecting the planet. Our STEM vision focuses on STEM in the service of humanity. Engineering with a mission, solar decathlon, which was a great effort here for several years, environmental studies and sciences, mission sustainable are all just a few of the relevant examples that this university can bring. Our students, current and future, we're joined here by future students from Bellarmine University, or Bellarmine Preparatory. These are our future leaders of more than just a humane and sustainable world. The young people today, Laudato Si states, demand change. They wonder how anyone can claim to be building a better future without thinking of environmental crisis and the sufferings of the excluded. We are ready to engage with Silicon Valley, and we're ready to answer yours and Pope Francis's call with Silicon Valley leaders to address climate change, repair ecological debt, and try and create climate resilience amongst the poor. One way to engage is through social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurship is the engine, in our view, that drives and generates climate resilience. At the Miller Center in this university, 500 social enterprises have come through our programs. Over half of them, when we apply a climate lens, have innovations relating to creating or delivering climate resilience. Examples include Solar Sister, Empower Generation, and Ilu Mexico, which each have clean energy for lighting solutions. A company, Carbon Roots in Haiti, has clean cooking fuel limiting deforestation in Haiti. Jibu, Aquasafi, and Nandi are all companies delivering community-scale access to safe drinking water. Komaza and Asoko empower smallholder farmers in Africa. iCure and Clinica Zazukar have health solutions for the poor. Social entrepreneurship answers the call to Laudato Si. In Silicon Valley, we also, through our programs or with our programs, have access to incredible mentors, people who have built the companies here, who have great international awareness, and who are willing to donate their time and energies to help create companies in the communities that are marginalized. We have over 100 of these executives helping us. In a recent paper that the university published, Universal Energy Access, we talk about a systems approach where we have parallel scaling of community-based organizations providing clean energy to the poor. We estimate that 7,000 to 20,000 such enterprises, these social entrepreneurs and social enterprises, are needed to reach 1.5 billion people, and we have an approach in mind. Silicon Valley always has something in mind. We can apply our great strengths, entrepreneurship, and innovation in the care for creation. In Laudato Si, a circular model of production capable of preserving resources and present, both in the present and for future generations, is asked for. An example of this circular model of production could be Sustainable Bolsa. This is another social enterprise that came through our program a few years ago, and they use agricultural waste as inputs, and the outputs are energy and fertilizer. Scientific or spiritual, the beauty of nature is an amazing design. Biodiversity and biomimicry as sources of inspiration will drive our thinking. Artemisinin for treating malaria, for example. This is a traditional Chinese herb. Received a Nobel Prize for the people who were able to extract it as an active compound. Flippers of humpback whales serve as a model to inspire more efficient windmills. Trees are a simple source of carbon capture and sequestration. To answer the sustainable development and integral development goals, we think the answers are found in the world around us and within. We thank you, Cardinal Turkson, for your work in Laudato Si, Pope Francis for calling us all to address these most pressing and intimately related problems of poverty and climate change. Thank you.
I was wondering if you had any particular points in John's presentation to which you wish to respond.
In particular, I just express a great appreciation for the lineup of the social entrepreneurship initiatives that are listed. And those are things that I think we could take on and probably, do follow up on them from our own office in Rome.
Excellent. I was wondering, we've talked about a number of different responses that Laudato Si puts before us. I was wondering if you could comment on if you think any one is more important than another. One is policy, another is technology, as John talked about, another is personal conversion. Could you comment, is one more important than another right now in the face of this challenge?
I don't think so. You could probably go down the line, probably just not these four, probably there could be some more. I don't think at this point at least, it's not a question of establishing priority in all of them. The issue is bringing them all together to be able to, formulate a solution. And this basically is also the nature of the dialogue the Holy Father is calling for. It's not from a particular and specific point of view, but so policymakers have a contribution to make. Religion does have a contribution to make. Economy and business has a contribution to make, just as any other people also have contributions to make. And I think it's all of us, coming on board with our contributions to solve this, to deal with this issue. That's why we keep saying that one of the images that the Holy Father comes up with to express this multifaceted approach to this is the image of a polyhedron, which he regularly uses as an image that invites all of us and from various sectors to come on board to marshal our own efforts together to be able to deal with a threat that stares all of us in the face.
Well, if I could just focus for a moment on one of those areas, policy, and you've mentioned the upcoming Paris talks and their tremendous significance for dealing with the issues of climate change. And in a sense, it's an issue, sort of the elephant in our room here in some respects, is in the American political context. Of course, there are many people who either, we could say, deny or dismiss the science related to climate change. And that obviously, politically, inhibits the degree of the American response that may be possible in Paris. I wonder if you could comment on the kind of trait in our country that we're seeing right now, dismissing scientific evidence or denying it.
See, at a certain point, the result of research work of 800 scientists is still considered by some not to be exhaustive enough. Okay, that you could still widen the gap and include them. I wonder how wide we can go there. But so 800 scientists who are advising the UN, climate change, and still some do not consider that to be, to be big enough. We've also received visits in our office from some physicists who come to say that those who establish all of this are chemists. Now you need real physicists, to be able to do this. And so it keeps going on and on and on. But before we have the luxury to so postpone action, it might be just in line with good, I don't want to use the word common sense, but it might be safe to even assume that it may not be happening here. And naturally, if the ice cap, if Antarctic is melting away, it will be difficult to experience that in Nevada. But out of solidarity, if somebody living in Papua New Guinea or Vanuatu tells you that his island is getting underwater, out of just solidarity and human concern, it might be good to want to listen to what he's saying. Certainly here you may not have that experience, but that's another group of people who have this experience. And so it is. At a certain point, I don't think people should be convinced about climate change because they can feel it where they are, because sometimes that's the problem. There is a tension between territoriality in polluting agents and universality of its impact. When the other day the volcano in Iceland erupted, it wasn't only Iceland that suffered from its impact. All flights in Europe were grounded. So anything that happens, that's also the sense of the global, talking about the atmosphere as a global common. anything may happen locally, but its impact can never be limited locally. And it's simply fair and a sense of, solidarity to want to see the impact of this in countries which are, as he, well outlined, the marginal, countries who suffer greatly from these impacts.
Yeah, so I'm reminded a little bit in your comments on a comment that you made in the past, which was, are we insulated here in Silicon Valley from truly seeing the poor or truly seeing the problem? And I think that we have many programs here at the university whereby the university students do go in country. And in one instance, they work with our Department of Agricultural projects. Another instance, they might go help a social enterprise. And I think that that experience opens the eyes, or at least puts us more in touch with the poor. And rather than fight or argue over whether we had physicists or chemists, the answer is the world, the globe is warming, and it can't warm much more without very tragic consequences that we're already suffering.
I had a clarification point that's come up in conversations with faculty and staff here at the university. In one point in the Encyclical, there's a specific discussion about carbon credits, and they're spoken of quite critically. But here in California, there's a cap-and-trade program at the state level that many people regard as successful, and there's also quite a bit of interest on the part of policy people, faculty here for carbon taxes and the use of possible use of carbon taxes. So the question was, is the Encyclical dismissing the possibilities of cap and trade and carbon taxes, or is it only dismissing a too easy reliance on something like carbon credits?
No, I think the thrust of the Encyclical will just be if we all agree that carbon is a polluting source, then it is wise to gradually wean ourselves away from it. Okay, and if carbon credit or carbon tax and all of that are ways of, dissuading, and prevent people from increased use of that, then it's, but ultimately, the thing is to probably replace all of these polluting agents with, less polluting ones. But it's, by the way, it's not only just here in the United States that this problem rages. Last Tuesday, today's Tuesday, a week today, I was in Poland in a place called Poznan. Poznan is a region in Poland that depends heavily on coal mining. The whole city, culture, everything is based on coal mining. And they found the Encyclical to be really threatening. As if the Encyclical was calling for closing down the coal mines and so, kind of collapsing, the activity, the culture, and everything of the city. So the ambassador of Poland to the Holy See was the one who came and thought that might be good for somebody from our office to go and, dialogue a little bit with the, and so we did. We did, and was to tell them the Encyclical. How can a pope who says that if a father cannot put bread on the table of a family, he loses dignity? So a pope who calls for employment, how can the same pope now call for unemployment? So the objective of the pope is not to call for closure of any mine so people are thrown out on the street, unemployed, but it is also to draw attention to the dangers that stares and see whether we cannot gradually replace this with other sources. And so I ended up then, I'm not a physicist, I wanted to be go into science in the past, but theology didn't allow me, so I'm not a scientist in any way. But on the way to Poznan, we read, I happened to have read a small review that enabled me to suggest to the people in Poland that coal may not be mined only to burn as fuel. Coal may be mined also as a contribution or something to be used in material technology, the development of new materials. Because going out there, I had read about BMW wanting to come out with a new vehicle and stated that the dashboard of that vehicle is all from carbon. And so the possibility is there to use, when carbon is mined or coal is mined, to be used also in this material technology or new materials technology, which is also a big thing in all universities. And then that still would maintain this industry and keep it going.
So there were a couple of us in this room who were skittering down a coal mine in Colombia last year, and you're right, the dependence of certain communities that are largely on the margin on particular earth extraction or coal industries, especially the coal industry, is quite high. And in those communities, we have to rebuild the fabric of the economy in order to be able to shift them to a different way of having a dignified living. I'm also, because I chose Colombia, because there's also a program being pushed forward there as part of the peace process with the FARC. Again, violent-torn communities, because of the violence, but have an economic fabric that has to be rebuilt. If we do both at the same time, it's a possibility.
I'd like to switch maybe to the realm of personal conversion or ecological conversion. That's such an important part of the encyclical. And at one part in the document, Pope Francis speaks of protection of the earth as an essential, he uses that word in English at least, an essential aspect of Christian life. Does that mean now that for us to be, in a sense, a good Christian, and I'll even expand it beyond that, to be a good human being, we must integrate a virtue of protecting the earth?
Pope John Paul or St. John Paul II already presented solidarity as a virtue. Hitherto it's just been presented as something that we need to do in support of Paul, but Pope John Paul II said it is a virtue to want to show solidarity, facilitate for the other what they need to make an experience of the common good. Subsequently, also the Pope went on in his UN address to refer to the earth as a right, environmental right to the earth. What I'll briefly say in this regard is simply this. For us Christians and believers, or people of the Bible, there is no way we can profess love for God and abusively treat what God has made. If we love, our love for God must show in the way we treat what God has made. And if we're looking for what God has made, there are only two things we can point to. God made the earth, and God made the human person. These are the two things God has made. So if we love God, then we must love what He's made. And that translates into care for the world and care for the human person. And this is it's in symptom with our faith and everything that we believe as Christians.
Well, Cardinal Turkson, you've come to us from Rome, but in a sense, you've also come to us from your beautiful home country of Ghana. And I was wondering, asking you an impossible question to speak for your people in Ghana, but I'm going to anyhow. And I'm wondering if you could share with us what your brothers and sisters in Ghana you think would like us to know here in Santa Clara, here in Silicon Valley, about climate change and climate change in light of the gospel.
And in doing this, I hope no, it's very simple. The challenges are real. Challenges are great. Ghana, to a large extent, is still a country that depends on wood for fuel. Wood, okay? So it depends still heavily on wood for fuel, although there's gas and there's electricity. But a lot of people in rural communities use wood, okay, for cooking, for everything. As a result of that, we have a big problem with forest denudation, deforestation, and all of that. When I was a child, when we used to go for firewood to come cook, I came back with planks of trees on my head. Same people, kids who do that, the same thing, come with twigs. The trees don't have a chance to grow to the size that we had in the past. So our demand on tree is such that trees and our forests don't have the chance to replenish to grow into whatever. So our forests are on the attack. And this is serious, seeing that Ghana is just about 15 degrees south of the Sahara, and the Sahara keeps creeping down. So if we do not have a culture of forest or tree growing, that will stop the forest. Gradually we would all be in the Sahel area, and things will be bad. Second thing is that most of the rivers in West Africa have their sources just where the Sahara is coming. So at a certain point, we can also anticipate that the sources of our rivers may actually dry up. That's why this afternoon, talking in a group somewhere, Ghana has a huge hydroelectric power scheme and a huge artificial lake. But once the waters pass, the turbines, they run free into the sea. And we depend on rains to replenish the water in the lake. So our suggestion to some technical people in Ghana, why can we not also install solar pumps below the turbine to bring back into the lake some of the water that have passed, instead of letting them run straight in the sea? And it's just going to be the use of solar power, so not the use of the electric power generated. So that's an issue. Issue about water supply, issue about forests and whatever is stuff that needs to be dealt with. Governments, so again, this is a question of government policy. The thing, and I say this not to criticize the government of Ghana in any way, but bad governance is something to look at. Bad governance in the case of Ghana is the way we allow indiscriminate mining. Ghana, unfortunately, from the old name was Gold Coast. So there's still a lot of gold in Ghana. But we need to have our priorities straight about where you can mine and where you cannot mine. And so mining for gold is now also a threat to our forests, and even a threat to our biggest foreign exchange earner, the cocoa, plantations and all. So these are huge, threats. Where still is the possibility of mining in waterways, which contaminate all waters, which used to be treated, for use. So we have all of these challenges, in addition to the very many that come from the mining company. I grew up in a manganese mining, town, and it was surface mining. And so where trees and forest used to be, at the end of the operation, it's all bare, whatever, and if you're not lucky, a huge crater filled with some water, with a fence there warning people not to get close. But that's the type of experience we have.
I wanted to go back to...
This will be our last question, please.
I wanted to go back to intentional act. And it was, to your question on, is there a religious overtone to, if you're a good Catholic or a good Christian or a good Muslim, are you acting through that faith in order to protect the earth? And I think that it's a values-centric act. And what I'm reflecting is to your example in Ghana for both earth extraction and forestry, deforestation, that the act by people, if it's conscious about their own consumerism and their own demand, can change with at least that intention. Two examples of Silicon Valley companies, one is Intel and the other is Apple, have recently made lighthouse publications on their measurement of their supply chain and the ethical and sustainable sourcing of earth minerals, especially those are the rare minerals that they use in both their chips and in their phones. And I think that this consciousness and this value-centric action is how we adopt. And I think it's above any sort of liturgy and on just, are we religious, soulful people on this planet, and we do care about both your people in Ghana and the people around the world.
That's good. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Cardinal Turkson. And our President, Father Ang, will close our time here with several remarks.
This is my opportunity to thank you again, Cardinal Turkson, for your remarks, for all that you've given us to reflect on. You've challenged us as residents of Silicon Valley to address these key questions of what kind of earth do we want to leave to those coming after us. You've inspired us to consider concern for the earth in tandem with concern for the poor. And as you return to Rome, you can count on us here at Santa Clara being available to be of any assistance that you might need. We're very happy to collaborate in terms of our research or anything else that we can do. And we hope to have you come back here many times in the future. So thank you again very much.